Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast. As your host, Nick Giordano, I'm glad you could join me today. Make sure you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com, and share this episode with others, because I got a great topic I want to talk about. But before I get to the topic, I'm going to make a quick programming note. We have less than a week until the election. Monday's episode is going to go out as normal. I have a great guest coming on. You're not going to want to miss it. However, I am pushing back Wednesday's episode until Thursday. Obviously, we have the election Tuesday night. I don't think that we're going to have all the results in. We're not going to know who necessarily won the presidency on Tuesday night. So hopefully by Wednesday we find out. I'll do an episode and I'll put out that podcast on Thursday. So keep that in mind. In the meantime, in the last week, we have witnessed a dramatic shift in the rhetoric when it comes to the media, government bureaucrats, the Democrats, the Harris campaign, and the vice president herself. They aren't even pretending to explain her policies anymore. They aren't even pretending that this campaign is about turning the page or that Kamala Harris is even offering something new. It's clear the joy is dead. Hope has morphed into fear, and aspirations, dreams, and ambitions has given way to dark warnings about the second coming of Hitler, about fascism and the death of democracy. And the playbook is clear. They are in panic mode. They are attempting to throw everything they can at Trump with the hopes that something sticks. In the last week, there has been noticeable change in tone. It's undeniable. And they aren't talking about themselves or what a Kamala Harris administration will look like. Instead, they are focused solely on Orange Man is bad. It's Trump 24/7. It's a desperation tactic because they have nothing else left. And I wonder what their internals are showing. Now, I still want to make it clear. This election is a coin toss. Nobody can predict it. So if you think Trump's got this in the bag, you have another thing coming to you. But the more people see of Harris, the more they dislike her, the more she validates how inauthentic she really is. And I just want you to listen to this gem from Sunday when Kamala visited a church.
Weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. The path may seem hard, the work may seem heavy, but joy cometh in the morning, and church morning is on its way.
That sound clip will live in infamy, and I can't for the life of me figure out why Democrats haven't realized that changing your accent depending on the voters you're speaking to, it doesn't win you any support. Instead, it makes you look like a fool. It reinforces how inauthentic and empty she really is. But it's not just her. Like, a lot of Democrats do this. They go out there, they change their accent depending on the audience that they're speaking to. And let me tell you something. If you're not Hispanic, don't try and use a Hispanic accent. If you're not from the South, don't try and speak like a Southerner. If you're not a preacher, don't speak like a preacher. It's really mind-boggling. You know, I would never sit there and change the tone of my voice and my accent because of an audience that I'm speaking to. And this is the exact reason why people gravitate toward Trump. Trump is Trump. Take from it what you will, but Trump never changes regardless of who he's talking to. You see the good, the bad, the ugly, you see warts and all. He doesn't pretend to be something he's not, but that's not the point of this episode. The point of this episode is to explain how Democrats are running on a campaign of fear, and even more importantly, there is something sinister going on. And I'm going to lay it out this episode, but first I want you to take a listen to Governor Tim Walz and what he says the Harris-Walz campaign closing messages. Take a listen to this.
Their closing argument is hate and division. Our closing argument is unity, joy, and the future, a new way forward.
So he says the Harris campaign's closing argument is unity, hope, and the future, a new way forward. And that Trump's closing message is one based on hate and division. Yet, here is the vice presidential pick warning supporters that they are on a list and that Trump and his supporters are going to take them out. Don't take my word for it. Listen to Governor Walz in his own words, and you could judge for yourself.
Look, I don't say this lightly because I didn't in my 60 damn years, I didn't think I'd ever see a candidate for president praising Adolf Hitler's generals or talking about using the military against their enemies. And I mean, it's pretty stunning. And I said, look, I recognize I'm on the top of his list, but don't kid yourself. You're somewhere on that list, too, if you disagree with these people. That's who they are.
Look, Donald Trump made it very clear that this is an election about Donald Trump taking full control of the military to use against his political enemies, taking full control of the Department of Justice to prosecute those who disagree with him, taking full control of the media on what is told and what is told to the American public.
Now, doesn't that say unity, hope, the future, a new way forward? There's nothing that says unity that when you accuse the other side of putting you on a list to take you out and telling your supporters that they're on a list. And it doesn't end there. Since then, the rhetoric has only been ratcheted up. It's certainly worsened. Democrats in the press are now warning that not only is Trump a threat to democracy, but he is literally responsible for killing women. That's right. They are now saying that he is literally responsible for killing women. Take a listen to this.
His cozying up to dictators, his obsession with Hitler that has now come out, what he has said about our veterans, and what he wants to do with the military against his political adversaries. It's all huge news. This is the future that we're looking at in the next Trump term, if there is one. But this is what voters know right now, that he is killing us. I'm talking about us women. He's killing us.
He doesn't just cozy up to dictators, he kills women. And the desperation gets more palpable. Every single day, they are growing more and more unhinged in their rhetoric. And this is following 2 assassination attempts on the former president. Now, not for nothing, but in just about every major poll, one of the candidates are up by 1 or 2 points. That's it. In some polls, the other candidate's up by 1 or 2 points. And while the momentum certainly seems to be with Trump, you have to wonder what their internal polling is showing. You have to. What's got them so afraid? And going after Trump isn't simply enough. It's not just about attacks on Trump. They are also going after his supporters. Listen to this clip from MSNBC's Joy Reid.
We're seeing Republicans talking about just taking the election to the courts and not having the voters rule. I mean, they are not only looking the other way when he says fascist things like round people up and put them in camps and mass deportation and round up all of his enemies and arrest them. They just shrug their shoulders and say there's nothing wrong with it. So the Republicans who are still on Team Trump are apparently fascist enablers.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, these are complicit fascist enablers. And Joy, unfortunately, there is precedent around the world for this type of behavior. We saw it in Nazi Germany. We saw it in Russia now as a whole crew of people have turned over and become Putin enablers. We saw it in my parents' home country of Cuba, where as Castro rose to power and became more and more authoritarian, they started to line up and normalize and justify his bankrupt regime.
So according to Reid and her guest, Trump supporters are fascist enablers. They are racist, they're misogynist, they're bigots. Understand, this is something that is coordinated. It's a coordinated attempt to dehumanize Trump, Republicans, his supporters, and it's intentional. And they've been attacking and labeling people for years. So some of you may be wondering, well, what's different? We've seen this all before. We've seen it get played. But it's clear they're pivoting away from policy-focused campaign, hoping fear alone is going to win them support. But why now? And to what end? And that is what I want to focus on in this episode, because we are seeing something different. This isn't your normal run-of-the-mill, Trump is a dictator from a couple of years ago. Something else is going on. And if they're this desperate now, what might they do if Trump actually wins? I want to dive into that question when we get back from this quick break. So everyone, hang tight. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the P.A.S. report. So we're digging into the unfiltered, increasingly aggressive rhetoric that's coming from not just the Democrat corners, but it's coming from government officials, the bureaucrats, it's coming from the press, it's coming from Hollywood and the elite. And it's not just about Trump. It's not just against Trump. It's against anyone who even considers supporting him. Over the weekend, the Democrats trotted out former First Lady Michelle Obama, and she explains how men are gravitating toward Trump because they are angry, because they are bitter and disappointed. And it's similar to the bitter clinger comments that her husband made when he was running for president, but it actually gets worse. And I want to preface this by saying these are the same people who accuse Trump and Republicans of dividing everyone. You know, I just played in the previous segment Governor Tim Walz talking about that the Harris-Walz campaign is about unity and hope. But just listen to what Michelle Obama is suggesting here about American men, their values, and how they view their mothers, their wives, and their daughters. It's a message that is dark. It is a message that is divisive. Take a listen.
We have every right to demand that the men in our lives do better by us. Have to use our voices to make these choices clear to the men that we love. Our lives are worth more than their anger and disappointment. And we are more than just baby-making vessels. And if you are a woman who lives in a household of men that don't listen to you or value your opinion, just remember that your vote is a private matter. Regardless of the political views of your partner, you get to choose. You get to use your judgment and cast your vote for yourself and the women in your life. Remember, women, standing up for what is best for us can make the difference in this election.
Did you hear that? I mean, think about what she is really saying. She is saying that men don't respect their wives, that men don't respect their daughters, that they look at women as nothing more than vessels. Think about how dark that is, and just forget about dividing society. She wants to divide households and make spouses and families view each other with suspicion. That is sick. That is demented. That is twisted. And mark my words, if Kamala Harris loses, they will seek to blame everyone. They'll blame white people. They'll blame men. They'll blame married women and say that they're just doing what their husbands told them to do, as if married women don't have their own minds. They'll blame black men and talk about how uneducated they are. They'll blame Hispanics. And it seems like hell hath no fury like the Democrats scorn. But this is how they view people. If you don't agree with them, if you don't subscribe to their groupthink mentality, they view you as a threat, someone to be ostracized, labeled, and silenced. They view you as an enemy, someone that doesn't deserve a voice, someone that doesn't deserve to be treated with respect or dignity, someone that doesn't have a place in their version of society. To them, you are obsolete. Now, on this program, I routinely criticize politicians. I routinely criticize Democrats. I routinely criticize some Republicans. I routinely criticize the media industrial complex. I certainly go after the bureaucrats in the bureaucracy. But what I don't do is denigrate those that support Kamala Harris. I don't denigrate ordinary Democrats. I may think some of them are misguided, but I respect the fact that Americans have passionate differences, that Americans are allowed to have their own opinions. That's what a free society is about. It's a natural part of our political process, and I am someone that actually wants two vibrant political parties here in the United States. Now, I may disagree with Democrats. I may disagree with ordinary Democrats, but you will never hear me use words like purge, deprogram, re-educate, Nazi, evil, and ever say those words when I am talking about ordinary individuals. I don't even use those words to talk about Democrat officials, but that's what they do. And I want you to take a listen to what Hillary Clinton said about former President Trump's Madison Square Garden rally. Take a listen to this.
And, you know, one other thing that you'll see next week, Caitlin, is Trump actually reenacting the Madison Square Garden rally in 1939. I write about this in my book. President Franklin Roosevelt was appalled that neo-Nazis, fascists in America were lining up to essentially pledge their support for the kind of government that they were seeing in Germany. So I don't think we can ignore it.
Does Hillary Clinton really believe that over 19,000 Americans that attended the event would really support a Nazi? Does she really believe that those attending the event want to destroy what they deem as democracy? Does she really believe that nearly half the country are racist bigots that hate people that aren't like them because they support Trump? See, the truth is, as Americans, we are remarkable people, and that when Americans fall on tough times, whether it's in a community that's impacted by a natural disaster or a neighbor that suffers a house fire, we are there for one another, regardless of political views, regardless of race, religion, or anything else. It doesn't matter. Just look at what's going on in North Carolina, where you have tons of Americans that are volunteering their own time, creating care boxes for those that were impacted by the hurricane down there. You have tons of people that have actually gone down there to help with recovery operations. But the Democratic Party doesn't see it that way. They view anyone who stands in their path to power as a threat, anyone who dissents as a potential domestic terrorist, anyone who goes against the narrative and doesn't subscribe to what they deem as acceptable views. They want to make those people subhuman, because if you can make them subhuman, well, then it's easy to attack them. And many had these feelings prior to Trump, but the sentiments were certainly reinforced in 2016 when Trump first won the presidential election. It was then that the powers that be determined that the American people could no longer be trusted. Interestingly, these are the same people that kissed Trump's ass prior to him jumping in the political arena. They liked his money, but what they don't like is that he's not beholden to them, and he challenges the status quo and political norms. More importantly, what they truly despise is how he uses the same tactics on them that they use on their political opponents. And they're not used to that. And just consider how they could label Trump supporters anything they want, whether it's racist, bigots, Nazis, fascists, you name it, they could label it. But the second you say something back, they'll be, see, he's racist. See, he's a misogynist. And it shows their desperations. They have grown so desperate that they have nothing. They have nothing to run on. And that is why they revert back to the whole Trump and his supporters are fascists, that he's the second coming of Hitler. Take a listen to the vice president herself.
It is deeply troubling and incredibly dangerous that Donald Trump would invoke Adolf Hitler, the man who is responsible for the deaths of 6 million Jews and hundreds of thousands of Americans. All of this is further evidence for the American people of who Donald Trump really is. This is a window into who Donald Trump really is, from the people who know him best, from the people who worked with him side by side in the Oval Office and in the Situation Room. And it is clear from John Kelly's words that Donald Trump is someone who, I quote, certainly falls into the general definition of fascists, who in fact vowed to be a dictator on day one and vowed to use the military as his personal militia to carry out his personal and political vendettas. Donald Trump is increasingly unhinged and unstable.
Do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I also believe that the people who know him best on this subject should be trusted.
Those were two sound clips. One was from a speech she gave right in front of the White House. The second one was from Anderson Cooper, CNN Town Hall. Think about the last week and a half, and it's easy to see how the rhetoric has changed, how the panic is setting in. This is coordinated and organized. And what frightens me, though, is I fear that something much more devious is afoot. And the question becomes, as the stakes grow higher, as we get closer to the election, one cannot help but wonder, what lengths will they go to if Trump wins? And I'll answer that question when we get back from this quick break. So hang tight and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the P.A.S. Report podcast. Now, as we continue to examine this question, the rhetoric, the changing of the rhetoric, and something bigger going on, we have to consider the growing desperation of the Democrats. Every passing day, it's clear that the narrative has shifted from joy to all-out fear-mongering. They are the party of fear. We saw it during COVID. We saw it throughout the Trump years. We're seeing it now. And it's not only aimed at Trump, but also directed at anyone standing in the way of their agenda. It's not just rhetoric anymore. I mean, again, we've witnessed 2 failed assassination attempts on the former president. So it's not about the rhetoric. And when we look at what's being said and who's saying it, this is a coordinated campaign to delegitimize both Trump, his supporters, and the 2024 elections. Last week, The Atlantic, they put out a hit piece on Trump. Yet 4 anonymous sources state that Trump constantly talks about his admiration for Hitler, that he wants his generals to be more like Hitler's generals. And it doesn't matter that all those who attended the reported meetings have come out on record using their names saying it's all a lie. You can't believe those people. Instead, you have to believe 4 anonymous sources that we have no idea who they are. But this is where they are beginning to lay the groundwork for something much bigger. Right before this article comes out, you have the announcement of Bob Woodward's book being released, where retired General Mark Milley, pathetic human being, comes out and states that Trump is a fascist who threatens our republic. And he stated that Trump is, quote, fascist to the core, end quote. And he alludes that Trump is a clear and present danger to the country. He's warning how if Trump wins this election, he is going to target all political opposition and throw him in prison, including Milley himself. He stated that Trump is, quote, the most dangerous person ever and the most dangerous person to this country, end quote. Now, think about that logically. It's not Al-Qaeda that's dangerous. It's not ISIS that's dangerous. Not Vladimir Putin of Russia that's dangerous. Not Xi Jinping of China or the mullahs of Iran. Not the pro-Hamas demonstrators that slur anti-Semitic comments and harass Jews and call for the destruction of Western civilization. Not groups like Antifa. Trump is the most dangerous threat to the republic. And this is coming from the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And Milley isn't alone. You have many others in the military and intel world who are saying similar things. You have retired General John Kelly saying something similar. Kelly now says that when he was Trump's chief of staff, President Trump would consistently heap praise on Hitler and called dead soldiers suckers and losers. And here's the thing. Do these people not have any ounce of self-respect? Do they not have any integrity whatsoever? Because I know that if I was serving in the Trump administration and he said these things, I would immediately resign from my post and I would put out a public statement detailing exactly the things that were said. And if Kelly would have done that, it would have destroyed the Trump administration. It would have neutered the Trump presidency. So why did Kelly wait nearly 5 years before saying this, before making this public? Does that really jive with you? Why didn't any of the top military brass immediately quit? I mean, if Trump really made these statements, calling dead soldiers suckers and losers, why wouldn't the military brass within his administration all resign at the same time? I mean, that would have been extremely powerful, but they stayed there. They stayed there until either they were fired or they resigned, but they stayed there. And the question is why? If he's such a clear and present danger, why did you stay? Why did you continue to get your paycheck? And it's because they're all frauds. It's not just about Milley and Kelly. This is about an entire bureaucracy that has been corrupted, ideologically corrupted, that despises the former president and that worked to undermine him throughout his administration, destroy him when he left office. And it's a bureaucracy that doesn't like the people. They have forgotten what public service means. They believe it means to rule over the public, that they're the bureaucrats, they're the experts, they're the elites, and we have to surrender to them. I want to ask you all out there, when we hear this whole Trump is a dictator, Trump's going to be a fascist, that he's the next Hitler, that this is going to be the last election America has if Trump wins, do you really believe that the bureaucracy would allow someone like Trump to take over the United States and become a dictator? Do you really believe that? Are you that naive to think that? Because let's be honest. If you do, it seems a lot of people think the president has much more power than they really do have. And again, it just raises so many questions. Let's just say they do truly believe it. Let's say the Democrats, their media allies, the bureaucracy, let's say they all genuinely believe that Trump poses an existential threat, that he's as dangerous as they claim, that he's more dangerous than terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda, or more dangerous than the leader of the communist regime of China, more dangerous than a nuclear-armed Kim Jong-un. Let's say we take them at their word, that they truly believe that Trump is evil and he's the next Hitler. Then doesn't it logically follow that they'd be willing to do whatever it takes to keep him from winning and taking the oath of office? If they truly see Trump as a figure who could end democracy, who could bring authoritarian rule, wouldn't they feel morally justified in taking extraordinary measures, no matter how extreme, to block his path to the presidency? In a way, wouldn't they have an obligation to prevent that from happening? I mean, you can't sit there and defend that you stood by as the second coming of Hitler was sworn into office. I mean, that really doesn't fly. Think about it logically for a second. If you're convinced that someone is fundamentally evil, a threat to everything you hold dear, a threat to our entire way of life, how could you, in good conscience, stand by and allow them to assume the highest office in the land? You can't say, well, the American people voted for evil, so we have to let evil reign supreme. That doesn't make any sense. And it's this line of thinking that leads me down a troubling path where any means necessary could become acceptable and justified in the self-anointed guardians of democracy because of their belief that the stakes are simply too high to take the chance. And the question is no longer about this idea of democracy or electoral fairness. It becomes a question of moral imperatives, where even subverting the will of the voters could be rationalized as a necessary act in defense of the nation. If this is their approach now, what happens if Trump actually wins? What tactics are they willingly going to employ to prevent the Trump presidency, and how far are they willing to go? And I'm telling you, when you look at the rhetoric, when you see all the people, who's coming out and who's saying these things, they are setting the stage where even if Trump wins the election next week, they will attempt to prevent him from taking office. They're going to claim it's their duty to protect the nation. All the accusations that Trump is Hitler and a fascist is an attempt to prepare the public, laying the groundwork to justify their actions when they're going to try and overturn this election. And they're going to do it under the guise of saving what they deem democracy. And that's the thing. That's what I want to focus on, because they said the quiet part out loud. So everyone, hang tight, and I'll explain it all when we get back from this quick break. Welcome back to the P.A.S. Report podcast. Now, as we're entering the final segment, I'm going to confront the question that looms over this entire episode and the entire election. What happens if Trump actually wins? We've seen the rhetoric. It's reached fever pitch, accusations, warnings, talk of Trump as an existential threat to the republic. But if the Democrats and bureaucrats truly believe the narrative, as I left off last segment, what lengths might they go to try and prevent him from assuming the office? Could we see unprecedented steps taken, all under the claim of preserving democracy? And the stakes have never been higher. So it's essential to understand how far they may go and how they're laying down the groundwork. Listen to this clip from MSNBC. Listen to it. This is a panel that's already talking about how Republicans are cheating and stealing this election. Take a listen.
I think Mark Elias has laid it out very well, and it's really good to see that the Democratic Party, the campaign, and third-party organizations out there in the democracy space have got lawyers geared up and ready to go. To your point, Alicia, it is a very important and unfortunate shift in our politics. The lying and the on-ground cheating has already started. We've seen it. It has the official patina of legislative action like we see in Georgia, but that's part of their steal and their lie about this election. So overwhelm the ballot with your vote, baby.
Now, that's what I mean by the groundwork's already being laid. They're already declaring that if Trump wins, the election is stolen. Everything we have witnessed, everything we are witnessing, is an attempt to socially engineer our society to accept government intervention if the election doesn't go their way. And it's going to be all in the name of saving democracy. The self-anointed guardians of democracy are willing to destroy it in order to preserve it. That's the logic elitists attempt to use. It doesn't really work, but that's what they attempt to use. Even more troubling is what Congressman Jamie Raskin has said. He said, let people vote for Trump if they want. Not a big deal. Let them vote for Trump. But Congress isn't going to certify the election because they believe former President Trump's disqualified under the 14th Amendment. So, according to Jamie Raskin, yeah, Trump may be elected, but we're not going to let him be inaugurated. Take a listen.
What can be put into the Constitution can slip away from you very quickly. And the greatest example going on right now before our very eyes is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which they're just disappearing with a magic wand, as if it doesn't exist, even though it could not be clearer what it's stating. And so, they want to kick it to Congress, so it's going to be up to us on January 6, 2025, to tell the rampaging Trump mobs that he's disqualified.
Again, he's saying the quiet part out loud. He doesn't care the results of the election. He doesn't care how this election turns out. Now, sure, he prefers Kamala Harris wins both the popular vote and the electoral college vote, so he doesn't have to go down this road. But if Trump wins, not a big deal. We'll stop it. See, they believe they have a right, even a duty, to protect the public from what they deem as a threat, even if it means overriding our electoral process. And this rhetoric, it certainly has real implications, especially when it's pushed by influential figures like Congressman Raskin, who suggests that they could simply block Trump from taking office if he's elected. And these people have no ability to self-reflect. None whatsoever. The same people that say Trump is disqualified from holding office because he questioned the results of an election are now threatening to undo an election that hasn't even happened yet, all because they believe that they get to decide, not you. When you talk about a lack of awareness, that's Democrats. That's the bureaucracy. That's the media. There is no lack of awareness. They don't see their own projection. But the suggestion that Trump's eligibility could be dismissed based on the 14th Amendment, it's troubling. It's laughable to one degree because no, you can't do that. But it's also troubling because it opens a dangerous door. It's not just about Trump. You know, everything in this day and age becomes Trump, 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 Trump. But it's not just about Trump. Today, it's about Trump. Tomorrow, who's the next Republican running? Who's the next person that questions the narratives, that pushes back against the elite mentality, our overlords? Who pushes back against the establishment? And it could be anyone who dares to challenge the status quo. If a handful of bureaucrats, politicians, and media pundits believe they could redefine the rules to block a candidate they dislike, even when the election has taken place, then elections are nothing more than a formality. Our banana republic status is complete at that point. Our republic's over. If those in power can simply just discard election outcomes that don't align with their vision, that's it. It's game over. And this rhetoric, combined with the actions and statements of officials, it's laying the foundation for this type of intervention. And it's going to be under the guise of legality, national security. People will be like, oh, that's ridiculous, Professor Giordano. They'll never get away with that. Yeah, I thought, you know what? I never thought they'd get away with what they did during COVID, but apparently they did. As if our Constitution just simply gets suspended in a crisis. But yet that's exactly what happened. These people have no regard for the Constitution. They say Donald Trump wants to terminate the Constitution on day one. Are these people kidding me? For the last 20 years, they've denigrated the Constitution. They've trampled all over the Constitution. They haven't said a peep about it. There's no criticism. There's no real pushback. Now all of a sudden they say they love the Constitution. Yeah, well, I have a feeling if the election doesn't go their way, let's see how much they love the Constitution still. They're constantly talking about doing away with the Electoral College. Constantly talking about it. Well, it's constitutional. Constantly talking about the need to censor and silence Americans based on what they deem as misinformation, disinformation. Constantly violate Americans' right to privacy. Constantly dictating to us where we could go, what we can do. So when they bring up the Constitution, it's laughable. And even if you disagree with Trump, you have to recognize the danger that precedent would set. This is a pivotal moment where Americans of all political persuasions better open their eyes and they better ask themselves, how far is the ruling class willing to go to burn this country down? Now, with that being said, we're going to get a glimpse into what's going to happen next week, so it's going to be a very important episode to tune into. Again, we might not have a winner by next week and we should be embarrassed by that. How we put up with this nonsense is beyond me. We should be able to figure out who won an election on election night. But the longer that we don't have a winner, the worse it's going to get. So let's hope that there can be a clear, convincing, and overwhelming victory where we don't even have to sit there and ask questions. But we're going to see if what I said in this episode comes to fruition. We're going to see. Hopefully the efforts fail. I don't want them to succeed because if it succeeds, regardless of your stance on Trump, it transcends partisan politics. It's a question whether we preserve the integrity of our processes or we allow them to be redefined by a handful of elites. And if they can redefine it, that's it. It's game over. They win. There's your authoritarianism. So as we go into election week, think critically about what's being said, who benefits from pushing the narrative of existential threat, and understand the true danger our republic is in. That you have people in very powerful positions willing to burn it all down because they think they know what's best for us. If you found the content of this episode informative, please give the P.A.S. report a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Take 30 seconds to write a review on those platforms and share this episode with your family and friends. I want to thank you for joining me, and you are going to want to make sure that you tune into next week. Monday, I got Lee Smith coming on. It's going to be a fantastic interview with him and get his thoughts. And then on Thursday, remember, programming note, Wednesday, I'm not releasing an episode. I'm pushing it back to Thursday. We'll talk the results of the 2024 election. So be sure to tune in.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.